Women in the culinary arts. We have two incredible chefs here to share their insights in the food industry. Coming up next on The Leadership Voice. Welcome to The Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show features leading women who are excelling in the culinary arts. The Leadership Voice welcomes Jamie Gwen, celebrity chef and author, as well as Shachi Mehra, chef and restaurateur. We also have a special leadership lesson today being delivered by Professor Adelina Gnanlet. So let's start things off with today's quote of the day. Today's quote comes from author and restaurateur David Chang. We're hoping to succeed. We're okay with failure. We just don't want to land in between. Our first guest today on The Leadership Voice is Chef Jamie Gwen. Jamie Gwen is a celebrity chef and certified sommelier, lifestyle expert and 7-time cookbook author who can be seen stirring up something delicious on television, on the radio, and in print from coast to coast. She brings the best to radio with her weekly syndicated radio show, filled with delicious conversation on all things culinary, heard every Sunday on radio stations across the country, and in her native Southern California on talk radio 790 KABC. Jamie can be seen on LA's #1 morning show on KTLA, Channel 5, on the Home Shopping Network, and on national television news shows sharing her seasonal lifestyle approach and her passion for food. Most recently, Jamie served as a judge for Fox TV's Master Chef, and her victory on the Food Network's Cutthroat Kitchen proved her culinary aptitude. Jamie's 7th cookbook, co-authored by Lana Sills and entitled Entertaining in Style, just released, and her previous title, Good Food for Good Times 2, is now available as an ebook. Jamie has been featured on the Food Network, HGTV, The Talk, Emerald Live, and Martha Stewart, and her sizzling restaurant reviews can be found in Modern Luxury's Riviera magazine. She is a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America, and her website, chefjamie.com, is a scrumptious resource for food lovers everywhere. So now, the Center for Leadership would like to introduce our first guest, Chef Jamie Gwen.
Hi, Jay.
Jamie,
thank you for
so
having
nice
me.
to have you on the show today.
I'm delighted. Thank you.
You know, a lot of folks, when they heard you were coming on the show, very excited, and people
flatter me.
And our people in the studio were wondering what kind of great things we're going to learn.
Right, like what cookies I was going to bring along with.
Yes, and they're all outside in the green room right now. So maybe we can start by sharing some about your inspirations.
Sure.
So, Jamie, what inspired you to pursue the culinary arts?
I've always had a love for food. I was raised by a single mom who cooked like the army was coming to dinner, but they never came. And I remember sitting on the counter in the kitchen. And my mom, still to this day, is very celebratory. We celebrated everything. And food was very central to everything that we did. So I grew up in a very food-centric house, and today I have a very food-centric home myself. I plan lunch at breakfast and dinner at lunch. Doesn't everybody? Mm-hmm. And I really came to understand that gathering around the table was where friends and family connected, and I loved that connection. So food has really been woven through so much of who and what I am and what I do. And I've had the blessing to propel a career in food and mix all of my other loves into it as well.
So your love of family and love of the family atmosphere and the love of the family traditions.
Yes, all intertwined. And then in high school, I was very active in speech and debate. I had ranked nationally. I loved that public presence and live speaking, and was very, very blessed to parlay my love for sharing my passion on that platform with food and sort of combine it all together to where I am today.
Oh, that's wonderful. So maybe you could share with our audience some about your journey after culinary school.
Certainly.
And how your career sort of woven through
Yes.
to where it is now.
I went to a private girls' school for high school. My mom gave everything to give me an extraordinary education, and then I went on to trade school, which was rather unexpected, I think. But my mom owned a cafe and bakery when I was a teenager, and the chefs in the area would sit at the espresso bar and write their menus, and I befriended them. And so at 16, I was staging, as they call it, or interning, unpaid, in a Wolfgang Puck restaurant in Los Angeles. And it was the first time I learned what an open kitchen was, and that you can't make mashed potatoes and wipe your nose at the same time because everyone can see you. It was a great learning experience. And I went straight to culinary school, to the CIA after that, and worked in professional kitchens for some years under the tutelage of great chefs. And interestingly enough, from a female perspective, that was a good while back, and there weren't as many women in the kitchen. So it was challenging times. I also, at some point, didn't like being behind the door, behind the wall. I wanted that interaction because of the love of personality and conversation and otherwise. So I moved into the dining room, and I really learned all aspects of the restaurants. And I had a very opportunistic experience falling into television, and I was 22 years old, and it was the start of something I'm very grateful for.
Oh, that's wonderful. So what would you describe as your breakthrough moment?
So we had a neighbor who was in television, and this really is a testament to the fact that networking, as we call it today, and what social media has brought, is really such a strength that we all, I believe, really need to focus on and be mindful of, because it's gotten me a long way. We had a neighbor who was in television, and the Fox Family Channel was launching a new show that was rather new at the time because it was the start of the sort of reality concept. And it was in a house, an actual house that had been built on the back lot at Universal Studios, but they took out all the, everything from the ceiling and so on so that they could run cameras and audio and so on. And they were going to shoot a television show live, and it was going to be totally interactive and very creative. So there was a gardening expert, and there was a crafting person, and celebrities would come in, and the dog trainer came, and it just felt like very real life. And they were looking for a chef, a culinary expert. There were 60 of us that were given an opportunity to try out, essentially, and I got my foot in the door because of a friend, a neighbor who knew that I loved to gab in the driveway and that I loved to cook, and I could try combining the two. And I would like to say it was all skill. I got very lucky. I beat the other 59 people out of the opportunity, and I won the chance to become the on-camera chef. And 2.5 years later, and almost 2,000 recipes, I learned how to execute food on television by being thrown into it. So it was very serendipitous, really.
Oh, it sounds wonderful, though. And so your big break was on that reality television show.
Yes,
and
called Home and Family.
Home and Family.
There were very loyal followers, so those that remember it know it they think of it very warmly, I should say.
And then what was maybe the highlight after that?
After that, I remained in television, and I've had a long run, which I'm very grateful for. But I then found this extraordinary multimedia platform that existed as well, where you can sit in front of a microphone and wear your bunny slippers and talk about what you love on the radio. And that, too, was an opportunity that, through sheer persistence, came to be. I would say throughout my culinary career and my media career, persistence has gotten me most places. When I worked in an externship from culinary school, where you spend 6 months in the middle of culinary school working in a professional kitchen, I wanted to come back home. And I digress, but I called the chef so many times that he finally said to me on the phone, "If I let you come here, will you stop calling me?" And I said, okay.
That's a good deal.
Yeah, that was my foot in the door. Radio happened the same way. I was persistent. I wanted it, and I worked to hone my skills and was given an opportunity to test on the air. And I loved it. I spent 3 hours taking live phone calls and answering cooking questions and sharing barbecue sauce recipes and interviewing up-and-coming chefs and celebrities. That was the start, really, of the rise of the Food Network, and artisans and experts, and radio became my passion and the channel, no pun intended, that I could share what I loved. So that was really my next big break, and I've been able to propel and continue the two as the business has ebbed and flowed and changed. And it's still about persistence to get where you want to be.
Yeah, and it seems like you've hit every form of media.
I'm trying.
I mean, you've got books, you've got radio, you've got television.
And now there is this social media platform that is so paramount, and it's figuring out what the next step is, and that you can't just blog anymore. You have to vlog in video form, that you really have to be progressive.
So you can't use the bunny slippers.
No, not on social media. You can't. Although it might be. It might be welcomed, I'm not sure. But everything I do, like my new favorite gadget, I have a smoking box. And so you can't just show a still picture of it. But now I have, smoke burgeoning from it, and the kosher salt becomes hickory smoked, and you're actually watching it in live action. And we all crave that now. But it's always that next step of making sure that you're on the cutting edge, or at least aspiring to be, of what the next big thing in media is.
So in your career, and your career has taken some wonderful, wonderful turns and some wonderful journeys. Could you
It's not always been easy.
Well, that's the part I want to talk about, is the part that maybe, because people must look at Jamie Gwen and think, oh, this is what a wonderful journey.
Sure.
And certainly it's been a wonderful journey.
Yes,
but could you talk about some of the challenges you've had to overcome along the way?
Certainly. I think we all have challenges, no doubt, in what we do. Mine are unique to me and to the business and the field that I'm in. And as I alluded to, it wasn't always easy being the only female. When I graduated culinary school a long while back,
there were 3 years ago.
Yeah, just 3.5 now.
Yeah.
Sure. There were 13 women and 140 that graduated. Today, I would say that it's close to 50-50 in the food world, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. We've come a long way, and we see more equality in it. But I was expected to lift the same great big huge stock pot that anybody else was in the kitchen, and there wasn't as much camaraderie as one would have hoped. There were, physical and emotional and mental challenges all the way through. And today those challenges still exist. There's a lot more competition in what I believe is every category of business today. So, I'm competing with those younger and maybe more tech savvy than I. And especially in this industry, youth and fresh talent is very prized. I continue to find my way and really hope that there is an appreciation for experience. But those challenges are only stepping stones, and I really believe that there is a next big thing, and I plot a 5-year plan. I'm not getting to it as quickly as I want, but it's still in the 5-year plan.
Right.
And I think persistence, and I go back to that, is really how you rise above those challenges each and every day.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. And I think overcoming challenges is really what makes us who we are.
Yes.
Makes
us strong.
So imagine, Jamie, if you were talking to a young chef, an aspiring young chef, a person that looks and says, oh, Jamie Gwen, I love what you have achieved. I love what you have accomplished. I want to make it in the culinary industry. What advice would you give a young, aspiring chef?
I would say, and this very much applies to your Center for Leadership, which I really admire, and I'm very grateful and proud to be here. I would say that you might suggest the same thing, and maybe no matter what field you're going into. I was very lucky to have very good mentors. And looking back, there are times that I wish I had embraced that more. I had stayed in touch. I had nurtured the relationships and the friendships. But those people who taught me along the way, who set me on my path, who gave good advice, who gave constructive criticism, which is sometimes the hardest part. Yeah. There were years that I never watched myself on tape on TV because I didn't think I wanted to see it, but there's so much to learn from it. Those mentors and those experiences of really learning from what I could improve upon have made me who and what I am, and I would like to say propel my career. Find a mentor, network, look to those who have achieved and succeeded, and ask for advice and learn from others. And those mentors don't always have to be older than you. Sometimes they're coming up in the world too, but they have something to share. I'm very grateful for time spent in a kitchen with Emeril Lagasse. He's an incredible man, and he's been a very good friend to me. And I've gone to him with a challenge or a problem, perplexed with something, and his advice has held true to the right path. And so I really believe if you can go under someone's wing, and if you can find and persist in that area that you want to be in, that you'll make it. You'll take 2 steps forward.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, they'll hear that advice and they'll think, well, I would love to have more mentors in my life. I think a lot of people expect resistance from others. Do you find that people are more willing to mentor than they might realize?
Oh, definitely so. I think the camaraderie, I think you have to put yourself out there and be vulnerable and be forthright and ask. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? But I find that a lot of the very talented, skilled, successful people want to pay it forward. They want to give back. They want to motivate. They want to mentor. And you don't know unless you ask. And searching those people out and really being very focused on what your expectation is and asking them what they're able and willing to give is a really wonderful way to try to put all the puzzle pieces together and then find your path.
Oh, that's terrific. Well, I want to thank you, Jamie, for being on the show today.
Thank you.
You've offered some great thoughts and some great wisdom. It's great to hear your story. So
I appreciate
thank you.
it
And
very
you will
much.
come back on the
Thank you,
show
Jay.
in just a few minutes when we do our
look forward to
Q&A. And now it's time for a featured segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? Today's Did You Know comes from CNBC.com. In 2016, it was reported that 60% of all new restaurant ventures fail in its first year, and nearly 80% shut their doors for good before they ever celebrate their 5th year in operation. This means that the odds are decidedly stacked against most new restaurants, which is why we have put together today's show to help our viewers increase their chances. It's now time for our Leadership Countdown, where we give our viewers a useful list of key strategies or tips to guide your quest for excellence. Today's Leadership Countdown comes from the Restaurant Business Startup Guide of bplands.com. We bring you 7 must-know tips on how to start a successful restaurant. Number 1, have the right intentions. If you want to make it as a restaurant owner, you have to love what you do. You will invest a lot of time and money, so make sure that starting a restaurant is your passion, not just a business venture you hope will make you money. Number 2, have a solid business plan in place. Your business plan should include a market research, a comprehensive look at your competitors, information on your target audience, an outline of your marketing plan, and a solid financial and budgeting projection. Number 3, choose a great location. With restaurants, location is everything. You need a spot that draws crowds, is easily accessible, and has the potential for growth. Whether you decide to rent space or build from scratch, selecting a location is one of the biggest decisions you will make as an owner. Our 4th tip on how to start a successful restaurant is to test your menu. Approach building your menu like an experiment. You want to get honest feedback from your potential customers about the recipes you plan to use at your restaurant. Number 5, hire essential help. Some restaurant pros advocate for bringing on a manager prior to opening day, but think through your biggest needs. You cannot do it on your own, so great restaurateurs have great people working with them. Number 6, secure funding and manage your cash flow. You may consider 3 pools of money. The first pool is for one-time costs like equipment. The second pool is to cover the restaurant expenses for at least 6 months. And the third pool is to cover your personal bills for at least 6 months. Don't let your restaurant fail because you overlooked the needed cash flow. And finally, our 7th and last tip on how to start a successful restaurant is keep marketing. You cannot solely depend on repeat customers, so you will need to keep your marketing efforts up to keep attracting new customers and make sure that your revenue stream does not thin out. Establish a strong social media presence, try an ad in your local paper, participate in the local fair, or host a small nonprofit get-together at your restaurant to keep marketing your business and attracting new customers. And that, viewers, has been your Leadership Countdown. Follow these 7 tips and you too can create a successful restaurant. We'll be right back after this commercial break. We have another special guest that you don't want to miss, so stay tuned.
Well, we found here at Honda Center and the Anaheim Ducks that the Center for Leadership brings expertise in doing research, in doing training. The faculty that has come and given the training to our employees does all the research themselves. They're not pulling this information off the shelf. They're out there researching themselves, talking from firsthand experience, and it brings such a level of competency that we, again, don't find from other trainers that are on the market.
Well, simply put, is what really differentiates and distinguishes Fullerton and the Center for Leadership really is your expertise. You guys are able to create customized content for our business based on true research.
The faculty from Cal State Fullerton, obviously they're professors of their field. They have deep knowledge and research, but also, aside from the theory, they really bring in some practical examples and they bring in a lot of interactive activities.
The Bringing Learning to Work initiative is our way of meeting the needs of Orange County businesses and communities. When our clients ask the Center for Leadership to come to bring learning to work, the clients know that they're getting cutting-edge information, the latest thinking in the field, but they're also getting world-class training. Welcome back to The Leadership Voice. Our next guest today on The Leadership Voice is Shachi Mehra. Chef Mehra has a passion for creating innovative and thoughtful menus that tastefully balance a variety of flavors and make cuisines appealing to a range of tastes. An ardent supporter of local farmers and sustainable practices, she takes great care in sourcing her ingredients. Born in India, her early family experiences helped to develop and shape her love of food and appreciation for balance in flavor and in life. Chef Shachi blends Western and Indian cultures to create artful dishes that successfully marry tradition with modernity. Her professional journey began after meeting Chef Bruce Johnson, hailed by the New York Times as a premier chef. He extended an invitation for her to spend a day prepping in his kitchen at Trap Rock Brewery in New Jersey. It was her first encounter with a professional kitchen, and after only a few hours, she knew she had found her life's passion. She was offered a job on the spot, and she went on to work in pastry and garde-manger for the next year. Chef Shachi has become known for bringing a unique global perspective to her work, which can be attributed to an 8-month culinary journey through India, Japan, and Australia. Upon her return, she went on to sharpen her skills in some of the most demanding kitchens in the country and was named one of the 5 rising stars by Gentry magazine. Prior to opening Adya, Chef Shachi received great press and acclaim as the opening chef at Tamarind of London in Newport Coast. Please welcome Chef Shachi Mehra.
Hi, Jay.
Hi, Shachi. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So tell us about your restaurant, Adya.
So Adya is our restaurant. We have 2 locations. One is in Anaheim in the Packing House. That one's about 3 years old, and the other one's in Irvine at University Town Center. Our focus is on Indian street food. So we do a lot of dishes that are
familiar to people that are familiar with Indian street food, and we're also introducing Indian food to people that aren't familiar with it. And one of the reasons we did fast casual for both locations is that we are able to offer something new to people that normally wouldn't necessarily want to have Indian food. So we have a lot of customers, especially at the packing house, that are coming in and have never had Indian food before. So we're able to create an atmosphere and create a space where people feel comfortable ordering Indian food, where they can see what's going on. We have open kitchens in both restaurants. That's really important to me. And we're able, all of our staff is trained to talk about the menu and get people to feel comfortable ordering something versus walking into an Indian restaurant where you don't recognize any of the language, you don't recognize any of the food, and then you're sort of fearful of what am I going to order? What am I going to end up with? So we also are price conscious. So there is something available for somebody who wants to spend $10 on lunch today or $8. You can get a keema pav, for example, which has been the top 10 sandwiches in Orange County for a couple of years since we opened. So we have been working on really just creating a space and a place for people to feel comfortable with Indian food, and people that are familiar with Indian food, for them to have a place where they can connect to food that they remember. So that it's important to me as a chef that Adya is a space for people that recognize the food to go there and enjoy it and have this memory associated with it, and people that don't know it have a space to experience something new.
Wonderful. Now, as a chef, you've actually had an opportunity to work in a variety of different restaurants, preparing a variety of different types of cuisine. Could you talk about where your identity as a chef comes from?
Sure. It is a combination of life experiences and work experiences. Definitely all the kitchens that I have worked in have sort of filled in where I get my what I would call my chef identity.
Right.
I worked for a guy that screamed a lot. I got in trouble a lot there. There was and is a culture that exists in culinary where it's about screaming and demeaning your cooks and making them do what you need them to do by doing it that way. And then there's another way of doing things, and I worked in another kitchen where we weren't even allowed to talk loudly, so screaming was completely out of the question. Right. And there's worlds of difference in different chefs' kitchens and the way that they run their operations. I mean, it's all very organized, or it should be, in my opinion. But there's music in some kitchens. There isn't music in other kitchens, and there's screaming and whether or not you're smiling. I got in trouble for smiling too much in one of my kitchens that I worked at. So all of these things sort of come together, and I pick and choose, right? You pick and choose what you think works. So for me, and in my kitchen, balance has been always really important, so work and life balance, or like flavor balance. It's really important to me because of the way that I grew up in kitchens, taking pride in what you do and creating a culture where everyone that is there takes pride in their work. They're proud of what they're producing. They're proud to be working here. They're happy to be working. So if somebody shows up to work and they look miserable, I'm concerned. I need to know why you're unhappy to be here today, what's going on. Because I do believe that if you're unhappy, that affects the food you're making. If you're customer facing, which most people are in my kitchen because it's open kitchen, it affects their experience. If you're not happy to talk about what you're talking about, if you're not happy to be here, it affects everything around you. It affects the people you're working with. So smiling is really important in my kitchen. Mm-hmm. Music is something that we have before service, but not during service. But there's a lot of things that just experiences that you kind of put together and piece together your own sort of identity of what things are really important to you. And the culture in my kitchen is very important to me.
Oh, that's great. So, so your identity as a chef, in terms of how you like to run a kitchen, has come from being able to work in a variety of different kitchens. What about your identity as a preparer of menus and different recipes? Where does that part of your
So all
identity
of what we do at Adya is Indian street food based.
Right.
So a lot of it is stuff that I grew up eating, either at home or on visits to India. Some of it is things that I've read about and researched, but I like to take those things that are very true to their origins, and I want to present them in a way that everyone can enjoy these things. So as a kid, I ate peanut butter and jelly for lunch, but I ate Indian food for dinner. So I've been a part of both cultures, and it's something that I pride myself on, is to be able to try and look at each recipe and each dish from these two very different perspectives. One of an Indian that was born in India and or grew up in India and is very familiar with these flavors and these tastes and the visuals, and versus somebody who literally has never seen any of this before. And all of the language seems different, and it's a lot of words they don't know or ingredients they don't know. And to be able to have both sides of that spectrum sort of appreciate what I'm doing with food is really important to me.
Oh, that's great. So as you think about your experiences and the experiences that you needed to acquire to be able to become a successful restaurant entrepreneur, tell me how did you acquire the experiences?
Working a lot and finding people that were doing what I wanted to do and exploring a lot of different options. And once I identified somebody that I could look up to or that was doing something that I wanted to do, I would seek them out, ask questions, ask lots of questions. I've been fortunate enough to open restaurants for other people. So there's lots of learning to be done when opening a restaurant. All of a sudden, you need to know about plumbing and electricity and construction and what kind of finishes and you're a designer and you're an electrician sometimes, and you need to know why this machine isn't working today and where things are going. You learn a lot about everything when you open a restaurant, and I was lucky enough to have done it 3 times for other people before I did my own. So all the skill sets that you need, being a leader to a group of people, being an electrician if needed, being a chef, creating food that is important to you, and being flexible enough to understand your market and be able to create what they want and understand what they want. So all of these things I gathered as I looked toward and moved toward my goal of opening a restaurant. So everywhere I went, you learn. I'm still constantly learning, and that's important, to constantly learn from everyone around you. I learn things from my cooks because they do stuff at home that I don't. I learn things from my aunts and uncles or family in India, or a street vendor is doing something. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, and how can I translate that into something that I can use? There's always things to be learned on a daily basis. And as long as you're constantly learning, I think you can gather all those skills that you need to open a restaurant.
Yeah, the notion of lifelong learning and never thinking we have it all figured out. We see that in a lot of themes and in a lot of other industries, and it seems like it's absolutely true in yours as well. Absolutely.
I mean, if you spend a minute thinking you're done and you got it all, I'm sure something will show up that you've never approached before.
They say that's the moment you think you have it all figured out, that's when the decline happens.
Definitely. I mean, something will happen. There's definitely always something, and especially in restaurants. Yeah. Always.
So our last question is actually my favorite question. So imagine if you were talking to a young, aspiring entrepreneur that wants to start a restaurant. They say, I want to start a restaurant. I want it to be successful. I want it to shine and be this great, successful business. What advice would you give a young entrepreneur that wants to start a restaurant?
There's several things. One is work hard. You got to work hard for what you want. Be humble. Believe in your product. Know your customer. Communication is so important, just internal customers and external customers. Communication is key. And be flexible. Be flexible is something I learned as we opened restaurants. For example, when Adya first opened, and this was a huge learning thing for me, the be flexible thing became apparent right away. I didn't have chicken tikka masala on the menu because I thought I'm going to open people's minds up to all these different chicken curries. And immediately, within the first 2 weeks, I realized that that's what my customer wants, and we put it on the menu. So these are things you have to be able to be flexible. When you learn your market and you know your customer, you need to be able to provide them what they want as what you want them to have. So somebody that comes in and has chicken tikka masala 5 times or 7 times because it's the best chicken tikka masala they ever had, maybe the 10th time they'll have something else, but maybe they won't. At least they still got the best chicken tikka masala they ever had.
No,
and that's
wonderful.
important to me.
I love that. You just described my platinum rule. See, the golden rule is you treat others the way you would want to be treated. The platinum rule is to treat others the way they want to be treated.
Perfect.
And and so that's one of your advice for new restaurateurs is to think about your customers and treat them the way they want to be treated, give them what they want.
Yes, to a certain extent, yes, you have to do that if you're in business.
Well, Shachi, I want to thank you for being on the show today. It's been wonderful spending the time with you, getting to know you, and sharing your wonderful story. You're an inspiration to future entrepreneurs that are interested in the culinary industry. So I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much, Jay. It was wonderful to be here.
Terrific. And you're going to come back and join us for our Q&A here in just a few minutes.
Perfect.
It's now time for the Leadership Voices Leadership Example. This leadership example comes from CBS Los Angeles. Today we present you Orange County's hottest new restaurants. Throughout 2017, new restaurants have been popping up, offering an array of cuisine. So here at the Leadership Voice, we bring you the 12 hottest new restaurants in Orange County, according to cpslocal.com. Hear that? You know what that means. It's time for today's leadership lesson. Are you ready to learn? Albert Einstein once said, if you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough. Every show we bring you, our viewers, an opportunity to learn from a faculty expert with a simple but useful 3-minute leadership lesson. Joining us today on the Leadership Voice is Professor Adelina Gnanlet, Associate Professor at Cal State Fullerton, to talk to us about the 3 keys for service operations.
I'm Dr. Adelina Gnanlet, and here is today's leadership lesson. I would like to talk to you about 3 tips for leaders to successfully manage service firms like restaurants, hotels, and retail. The 3 tips are focus on customer retention, exceed customer expectations, and value your employees. Tip number 1. Focus on customer retention. Finding ways to retain customers and making them loyal to the service firm is a critical component in deriving higher revenues for the organization. Research shows that 5% increase in customer loyalty leads to 25 to 85% increase in profits. This is far more profitable than engaging in extensive advertising and marketing to attract new customers. Tip number 2, exceed customers' expectations. Service firms should consistently strive to meet or exceed expectations of the customers through the service that has been offered to them. Customer expectations change over time. They change because of past experiences, and they change because of reviews from friends and family. Firms that constantly engage in meeting or exceeding such changing customer expectations are considered world-class. Ritz-Carlton hotels provide world-class customer service by training their employees, wherein managers serve their employees in a way that the managers want their employees to serve their customers, with the motto of ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Tip number 3, value your employees. Employees are the face of the company in a service firm, and therefore need to be valued as an employee and as a team member. For example, Nordstrom uses an inverted pyramid where the frontline employees are provided with greater autonomy and discretion for decision-making with appropriate time and money resources, while managers take on a supportive role as opposed to a typical supervisory role. During the weekly meetings, managers cheer on their employees and convey the culture of proud to be a naughty. In summary, leaders managing service firms should strive for customer retention and loyalty, engage in activities that meet and exceed customer expectation, value their employees to become a world-class service firm. As you can see, leaders in service firm should prioritize their customers and employees above themselves. And I'm Adelina Gnanlet, and this has been today's leadership lesson.
Thank you, Professor Gnanlet, for sharing your insights on service operations. It's now time for the Leadership Voices Q&A. Do you need some advice? Well, you've come to the right place. Every show we take questions from you, our viewers, and we answer them right here on the show. Today we have 4 questions, and our 2 guests have agreed to stay on and help us answer these questions. So thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Shachi, for helping us with these questions. Our first question comes from Dwan in Fullerton, California, and it's for Shachi. Where do you get your inspiration from your dishes?
Everywhere. It could be a dream I had about something. It could be a color I see on my way to work one day. It could be what somebody next to me ate for lunch. I mean, there's a lot of different places and a lot of things. Memories can trigger certain things that I would like to make. It could be talking to somebody on the phone and talking to them about what they're eating or what they're going to eat or a place that they went to, and then taking that and turning it into something new. So it's really a combination of everything that's happening around me and turning that into a dish or multiple dishes, or it could be a craving. I could just want to eat something and want to create something out of that.
Oh, wonderful. Jamie?
I'm inspired similarly to Shachi by things around me and things I see, and my own culinary experiences outside of my personal kitchen. So oftentimes, you know, I think that flattery in, you know, seeing one of Shachi's dishes, not that I'm mastering Indian food anytime soon, but dining out might spark a memory or an idea or a method by which I want to cook chicken or try a new way. And so it's those experiences rather that I think bring new dishes alive. I spend a lot of time researching and on the internet as well, and I think there's something to learn from everyone. And so my dishes tend to be a hodgepodge of, you know, a bit of my childhood strewn throughout, something more modernized with a flavor that I remember from that last trip to New York and that, you know, restaurant I went to for that one chicken dish that I just had to have, and it all culminates together.
Oh, that's wonderful. So our second question is for Jamie Gwen, and it comes from EJ in Cypress, California. EJ asks, how did the rise of social media affect your career?
Well, EJ, it's been no doubt a challenge. I think social media and technology today is brilliant, but I believe it's a double-edged sword. You know, for me, interestingly enough, there is more competition than ever, and for many of us as well. But social media has given, you know, novices and connoisseurs alike a platform to compete in the same space. And so I think it challenges all of us to try to stay ahead and rise above. But it also personally challenges me to try to elevate what I share and how I share my passion to a broad range of people. And for that, I think social media is brilliant. I think trying to stay ahead is the greatest challenge of social media for all of us.
I will absolutely agree with that. And I will say, I do think as a restaurant owner, social media allows us access to more people. We have access to thousands more people than we would if we didn't have social media. Absolutely, just in positive and negative ways, but we're out there. People can talk about us in different countries, in different states. People can look us up before they visit where we are.
That's true.
Yeah, with reviewer apps. And
Yeah, locals can see what the special is today without having to come in and find out.
It does separate us, though, from the dialogue that this, engagement gives us, which I love. My mom will tell you she knows all of the hairs right here on the top of my head and where they are, because we spend so much time doing this, right? And it's true, but it's the means to the next step, the means to an end. And it's necessary and it's essential.
Yes.
And it's brilliant in lots of ways. And then it also has its drawbacks, as we all know.
Oh, obviously. So our third question is for Shachi, and it comes from Genesis in Los Angeles, California. Genesis asks, they say 80% of restaurants fail within the first 5 years. What do you think defines or separates successful restaurants from the failures?
Definitely everything that we talked about previously in the show. I will say that it's important to know your market. It's important to believe in your product. You have to know what you're getting into. I would definitely recommend having done it before in some small way. Go and experience what working in a restaurant is before you open a restaurant. I think that there's a lot of things that'll separate successful restaurants from others. Another one that I've noticed more recently is this going back to being flexible and appreciating who your customer is and who your client is. Your internal and external customers are really important. Communication with them is really important. And as a business owner, you've got to be able to be flexible enough to make the changes that your business needs from you to remain successful and to stay successful and to be successful. You've got to be able to be flexible and make changes as needed.
What have you seen, Jamie?
I think that's the life lesson in and of itself. I mean, being flexible today and more flexible than ever, I think is necessary and apparent. I think that Shachi is a beautiful example of, and we've been friends a long time, and I'm very proud to call her my friend. Shachi is a beautiful example of success from passion. And there are plenty of passionate people that for unfortunate circumstances or reasons or otherwise might not have made it as far as they've wanted to as of yet. But I think that passion, that commitment, that tremendous dedication, not just in hours, but in heart and soul, that you can taste the love in the food, those are the restaurants that I see propel themselves, succeed, build a following. I think that applies here as well. I mean, hopefully you see the passion in what each of us does independently, and it makes its way into your home, onto your plate, into your mouth, however it gets there. I think passion at the root is everlasting.
Yeah, and earlier we talked about some tips for restaurants, for having successful restaurants, and I think the first thing on the list was to have to do it for the right reasons,
yes,
and to have that passion. So.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. Now, our fourth and final question is actually for Jamie, and it comes from Rebecca in Irvine, California. Rebecca asks, how do you respond to criticism in your industry?
A loaded question. I could tease and say, I just block you, but that doesn't really work, nor should it. I think that there is a level of constructive criticism that is very helpful. I think as Shachi alluded to, there's a lesson in it. There's a learning curve in it that's really important. And I think we have to be humble enough to take it in and read it and experience it. And sometimes there's some brutal honesty in it that might be hard to palate. But I think if you can see the forest through the trees in it, if you can find the good in it, and maybe there's some spin in there, I mean, that's part of media today, then you can palate it for sure. I think that the criticism out there exists more than ever, and I try to take it with a grain of salt. And I hear plenty of it, and sometimes there's a day I don't want to hear it, and then sometimes I'll embrace it. I think taking it on and trying to learn from it, as you spoke about, is really the most powerful action that we can take.
So it sounds like there's a lot of it has to do with your mindset.
Oh, definitely so, yes.
Of how prepared you are to even receive the information.
And how you perceived whatever action it is that's being criticized. You know, if you thought the dish was brilliant and then someone said it was bland, and you're dumbfounded by the fact that it was bland because you know what went into it, literally and figuratively. Yes. It's hard to believe.
Right.
But if you can step aside or respect other people's opinions enough that you might not agree, but you're willing to listen, then there's power in it.
That's great.
I think that's really important, the ability to agree to disagree.
Yes.
To take somebody's criticism for something like, you know, this dish didn't have enough salt for me, because food is so personal. So there's a lot of very specific criticisms. To be able to, if it's a criticism that you can understand and you can learn from it, then that's what you should do. If it's a criticism that you may not agree with, then I still think it's important to listen to it and just not agree with it, and that's okay.
Oh, terrific. Well, that wraps up our questions for today. I want to thank you both for helping us with today's Q&A.
Of course.
If you have a question or need advice, having leadership challenges at work and need some expertise and insights, send us your questions here to the Leadership Voice by email, leadershipvoice@fullerton.edu, or contact us by Twitter at CSUF_leadership. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today's show. Today we've explored leading in the culinary industry. Thank you to Chef Jamie Gwen and Shachi Mehra. Thank you also to our special faculty guest, Professor Adelina Gnanlet, for delivering today's leadership lesson. Join us each episode of The Leadership Voice as we will have 2 more executive guests, another special leadership lesson, and lots more worth tuning in to see. I'm Jay Barbuto, and on behalf of the Center for Leadership in Mahalo College of Business and Economics, we'll see you next time right here on The Leadership Voice.